Hello, this is George from George's Music Blog, and today I am talking about the Analogue Bubblebath series by Aphex Twin. The series consists of 5 EPs released by Richard D. James between 1991 and 1995. The first of these was his very first official release and came out under the artist name The Aphex Twin. The 5th installment never had an official release, with James apparently being dissatisfied with the quality of the tracks. Anyway, we'll get into the details soon. Analogue Bubblebath contains some legendary Aphex cuts as well as plenty more obscure tracks. And while I doubt they were ever truly meant to be seen as a coherent series, to start with, I expect Rich just liked the name. They do offer a handy summary of how his music developed during the first half of the 1990s. So let's get into it, and we start with Richard D. James's very first release as Aphex Twin. And it is the eponymous first track which defines the essence of his sound in the early 90s. That ineffably melancholy sense of melody paired with relentless propulsive rhythm. Like a cherished landmark appearing on the horizon, the timeless classic Analogue Bubblebath has been bringing respite for knackered ravers for over 3 decades. The soothing, balm-like drone, the pulsing bloop that anchors everything like a lighthouse beacon flashing in the darkness, and then the iconic synth melody that washes over everything like a sunrise in the breakdown at 1:10. Although clearly the product of its time, this track will surely never get old and will no doubt continue being dropped by DJs and enjoyed by home listeners for many more decades to come. Elsewhere on the release, we have Isopropophlex, which is a harsh techno stomper and a preview of the extreme lengths that Aphex Twin's music would later reach. Juxtaposed with the menacing atmosphere of the track, there is still a palpable sense of mischief here in creating a DJ tool that could transform any track it's mixed with into an acid techno nightmare. Despite its unrelenting harshness, it is surprisingly listenable. This is no doubt down to the production, which has aged remarkably well. And while the beat does kick like a mule, there is a ghostly ambient melody filling out the mix and elevating the track to more than just dance floor fodder. Then we've got Entrance to Exit, which is really only noticeable as a curiosity, being James's only collaboration or only recorded collaboration with fellow Cornishman and cosmic musical visionary Tom Middleton, who went on to create seminal ambient music as half of Global Communication, as well as dozens of other albums and DJ mixes. It's a shame, really, that the pair only worked together once and at such an early stage of their career, as this track is really just a bit of 90s rave knockabout fun and is hardly representative of either of their best work. The track AFX 2 is another robust industrial techno workout and not too much to write home about, to be honest, but it does contain all the hallmarks of James's early style, those off-kilter percussive patterns, customized analog synths, and an eerie sense of malevolence. Overall, though, this EP's value lies mainly in the fact that it is Aphex's debut release, and it is absolutely carried by the title track, which is an absolute classic. Isopropophlex would still cause dance floor carnage today, I expect, but the other 2 tracks, I would say, are only really interesting as historical curiosities. Okay, so moving on to Analogue Bubblebath 2. Now, although it is not the official release of Digeridoo, Analogue Bubblebath 2 is actually the first place, chronologically, that we encounter that track in Aphex's discography. One of his most notorious early cuts with its iconic tribal acid line, which is labelled here as the Aboriginal mix. The inspiration reportedly came from the New Age travellers who would pitch up at raves in Cornwall and sit at the back of the dance floor playing said Aboriginal instruments. Although the sound of the riff itself is most likely originated from a Roland TB-303 rather than a sample of an actual didgeridoo. The track's manic energy was apparently driven by the need to knacker ravers out at the end of the night. With most clubs closing sometime between midnight and dawn, when the lights came down, the loved up crowd would still be raring to go. So James supposedly decided to create a track so intense it would just properly finish everybody off for the end of the night. The reason the track appears here first rather than the official Digeridoo EP is because James was paid a flat fee for the track by RNS Records, who released the official version, a sum he obviously wasn't satisfied with. Figuring he could get paid twice for the same piece of work and spotting a contractual loophole, he took the same track to Rabbit City Records, where it was rushed out on white label as the Analogue Bubblebath 2 EP. When they found out, the rep from RNS was so pissed off, they went and bought up all the copies they could find of Analogue Bubblebath 2, hence why it is so rare. Please note that story is just what I have found through some internet research, and I cannot personally verify any of the contents. The other two cuts on this EP were both new to my ears when I decided to listen to the entirety of the Aphex discography in chronological order a couple of years ago. So it was quite a novelty to hear a few Aphex tracks I'd not heard before. Neither of these are as instantly recognisable as Digeridoo / Aboriginal Mix, but they do embody the same manic energy and harsh industrial timbre. The third track on the release was later given the amusing / gross appellation Alien Fanny Farts when it surfaced as part of the SoundCloud dump in 2014. Whether the squalling acid line sounds like extraterrestrial ionic flatulence or not, I couldn't say, but the bass line sure is a ripper. Now, before we move on to Analogue Bubblebath 3, this feels like a good point to mention that I am new to YouTube and the channel is really small. So please give this video a like, even if you're just vaguely enjoying the content, as it really does make a big difference. Plus, it helps more people discover the music of Aphex Twin, if nothing else. Okay, so moving on again to Analogue Bubblebath 3, which came out in 1992. This is the first release under the AFX moniker, which James would generally only use for releases on his own Rephlex Records label. Analogue Bubblebath 3 does have the runtime of a full album, which would make it James's only LP on his own label. But for some reason, it's categorized as an EP, and to be honest, I'd argue there's only really an EP's worth of decent material here. It does feel a little bit more like a collection of B-sides and outtakes from other albums. It's impossible to know exactly when these tracks were created, but the level of quality is definitely not at the same level of Surfing on Sine Waves or Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92, which were released around the same time. The tracks are all given numerical code-like titles, and as always, there's gems to be found. Cat 00897, etc. is like the little brother of Analogue Bubblebath from the first EP, with a chiming synth melody and cavernously reverbed drum beat. Point 1993841 feels like the evil twin version of On, with its pummeling downbeat and a malevolent zapping laser sound in place of the iconic piano arpeggio from On. Point 215061 has a lush synth line that leans heavily on early electro and has an almost synth pop vibe atop what is by this point a typical Aphex Twin drum pattern. 000890569 retreads the same format with a souped up riff and a ravia beat, probably the most trance-wards that Aphex Twin has ever veered. On both those tracks, the production sounds very wet. That's not a technical term, but it is the best I can think to describe it. It's hard to say if this is intentional or just a function of poor mastering, poor production choices, but it is not something that the previous two releases in the series suffered from. Now, obviously it was part of the whole ethic of the label, but with their ultra minimal no frills packaging, Rephlex didn't exactly give you a huge motivation, apart from the quality of the music obviously, to treasure their releases, which is why I never held on to my old compact disc copy of Analogue Bubblebath 3, lost to the mist of time sadly. Anyway, although there are a few nuggets here, Analogue Bubblebath 3 feels like a little bit of a hodgepodge. Now, here we come to a release that I am almost certain I had never listened to before until just a couple of years ago. So it was something of a treat to get some new, to my ears anyway, Aphex Twin material. But after playing it a few times, thanks to YouTube, I can see why I never troubled to search it out back in the day. The 5 tracks here are all untitled, but have been given fan titles based on the prominent sound or sound effect or sample featured in each. So we have Elephant, Cuckoo, Gibbon, Sloth, and the 5th one is simply a snippet of American stunt double Evel Knievel, explaining how he approaches fear in his line of work. Take from that what you will. They're probably some of the least Aphex Twin sounding Aphex Twin tracks I have ever heard, to the extent that if I had downloaded these as MP3s from a file sharing platform back in the day, I might have suspected some of them to be fakes, which was a common occurrence one had to be watchful of when engaged in music piracy. Elephant is a straight up techno stomper, although the sample sounds more like somebody going whoop than an elephant. More digging, in fact, reveals it to be a sample from an old ragga tune. Gibbon would sound at home on one of the earlier installments in the series with a twisted acid line doing the job of aping the monkey. I'm not sure how they came up with the title for Sloth. I couldn't really tell you what noise a sloth makes, but as you'd expect, it is a slow and placid piece with a pleasant synth melody and pointillist drum pattern. Cuckoo is the most interesting find here. Playful, energetic and funky, but with that characteristic Aphex weirdness as well. The wobbly acid synth line feels like the blueprint for some later tracks, maybe even Fingerbib off the Richard D. James album. Repeated plays have enamoured me a little bit more towards Analogue Bubblebath 4. Despite it feeling like a bit of a ragtag collection, it is an interesting stepping stone and still has that idiosyncratic Aphex oddness that you gotta love. Okay, so finally, Analogue Bubblebath 5, the elusive 5th installment in the series, which never actually saw the light of day with a proper release. James apparently was dissatisfied with the quality of the tracks, feeling that they were not up to scratch with the rest of the series. According to Lore, aka Internet Rumours, Analogue Bubblebath 5 was initially circulated as a demo tape among close friends. Then, 10 years later in 2005, after a packing error with one of the Analogue EPs, which saw customers sent a sleeve with no disc inside, hand-labelled copies of the mysterious Analogue Bubblebath 5 were sent out with the replacements as a bonus to make good for the mix-up. Was this the same music that had been recorded 10 years earlier and circulated among the inner circle, or just some random tracks dug out of Rich's hard drive for a marketing wheeze? Who really cares too much? Assuming the version that is now available on YouTube is indeed the same as the original, then it definitely sounds like Aphex Twin circa that time. Analog synths, crunchy distorted percussion, and a distinctly earthy, organic feel, they could all be plausible outtakes from I Care Because You Do. Track 1 is a prime example of James's trick of imbuing his melodies with a distinct sense of personality, so they feel like little characters acting out their part in a story. This one being some kind of puckish fairy come out to play. The melodic synth line slowly emerges out of muffled lo-fi crackle and develops into a playful dance. Analogue Bubblebath 5 is full of odd little experiments like this in typically idiosyncratic style. Quality and originality, to my ears at least, is easily on a par with Aphex's other EPs at the time, but maybe he just fell out of love with the whole project. Still, the lack of official release does make it a nice little Easter egg to hunt out, even if the contents are merely unusual as opposed to mind-blowing, and probably not worth paying $2,000 for, which is supposedly what sub copies are going for online. Okay, final reflections. So yes, as I said at the start of the video, I don't know if all 5 EPs were always intended to be considered as part of a series, but this is the internet after all, so you probably want me to rate them or rank them, which I don't usually like doing as it's such an artificial kind of choice. But anyway, if I had to, I would put Bubblebath 2 in 5th place, just because it's only 3 tracks, and Digeridoo is the only decent one really, which is available elsewhere on the official release. In 4th place, I would put AB4, as none of the tracks other than Cuckoo are really that memorable. In 3rd, I guess it would have to be Analogue Bubblebath 1, which is maybe a bit unfair, as if it was just based on a single track, then the track Analogue Bubblebath would easily be at the top of the list. In 2nd place, let's say AB3, just because there is a good handful of decently solid tracks on that one. And then finally, in the top spot, ironically, as it wasn't actually released, Analogue Bubblebath 5, which is just much more distinctive and unusual than the rest of the series, and it's actually something I would put on and play all the way through. So there we have it, the Analogue Bubblebath series. Please check out my channel for more of the same. And again, if you're still watching the video at this point and you haven't done so already, please give it a like. It really does make a difference. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.